Welcome to the Crazy Might Work podcast, where we celebrate authors, entrepreneurs, innovators, inventors, and scientists who live at the very frontiers of human consciousness and possibility. We discuss their moments of breakthrough and analyze the strategies they use to enhance their own thinking and challenge conventional wisdom. Our guest today is a serial innovator. She is here to tell us how she and her team have maintained such a phenomenal run of innovation awards and give us some insight into how we might lift our own inventiveness. She leads the Gilbert Tobin Legal Service Innovation Team and G&T Innovate. Under her leadership, Gilbert Tobin was named Most Innovative Law Firm in Asia Pacific in 2019 at the Financial Times Most Innovative Lawyers Awards. They've been Most Innovative Firm for the fourth year in a row at the Australian Financial Review Client Choice Awards and winner of the Excellence in Technology and Innovation Award at the Australian Law Awards. She was recently awarded Most Innovative Changemaker at the Financial Times Most Innovative Lawyer Awards 2022 and has won Innovative Year in various Lawyers Weekly Awards, including in 2019, 20, and 21. She is a partner and the Chief Knowledge and Innovation Officer at Gilbert Tobin. Please join me in welcoming someone who really knows how to innovate, Caryn Sandler. Hi, Caryn. You've shown an amazing ability to keep winning these awards for innovation in the legal industry. I'd just love to know what, in your mind, is the reason that you put this down to.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting question, Paul. I think for me, it is just passion and sheer grit and determination by myself and also all my team members to really deliver the best in the area in which we work. And I think a really big contributing factor to that is Gilbert Tobin is a firm that really supports innovation, and we're really lucky in that we've got a really agile approach to the way in which we work, and we really aren't constrained necessarily by various approval committees. So by GMT really empowering myself and also my team to execute on the innovation agenda and having real freedom to operate, I think we've been able to swiftly deliver on various initiatives for the firm and also our clients. So I think that is really, all those factors has really resulted in us being able to deliver well for both the internal organisation and also for our Gilbert Tobin clients.
So, Caryn, you've spoken a little there about the social context, if you like, that makes the innovation possible. But I'm just interested in whether you would still be as innovative outside of that environment as you are in it, and just whether you consider yourself an innovative person. Is that something that you felt you were outside of this environment, or is it something that's been fostered in it? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting. Look, if you reflect back on, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, innovation probably wasn't the thing that it is currently today. Yeah. So I wouldn't necessarily have said that I'm an innovative person per se, but I think I've sort of got the right ingredients and also have the right mindset to bring to an innovation sort of agenda, and have always been quite creative in approach. So I've always been, that person that sort of looks outside, thinks outside the box. So I suppose those are natural attributes that sort of foster an innovation agenda. But I wouldn't have per se said, 20 years ago that I'm an innovative individual, but certainly have always been quite creative in approach as well.
So, and how long have you been in an innovation named role now?
So it's been around, it's been around 8 years or so. I started my legal career 20 years ago and sort of did traditional sort of client-facing legal work, both in M&A and equity capital markets. I did that for many, many years, and then moved into a knowledge management role about 12 years ago or so when my first child was born, and then sort of the legal industry, I suppose, evolved, and I moved more into an innovation type role about 8-10 years ago.
So with that time, under the belt now in an innovation role, is there a practice or a way of thinking that has become your go-to? When you really need something a bit different and you really need something innovative, a different perspective, is there something that works for you more often than not?
Yeah, so I think Look, I enjoy collaborating with people, and typically I think teamwork is incredibly important. So I suppose from my end, when I'm faced with a complex problem, I really believe in diversity of thought. I really believe in bringing together those people that you trust to really think about those problems, and that's where I naturally go.
So you're thriving on that interaction with your team and
Exactly.
others outside of that.
Exactly.
So there's a long list of innovation awards. Lots of innovations. Is there one that really stands out for you as something maybe at a more personal level where the penny dropped or you had a eureka moment of some description? Is there anything like that as you reflect?
Yeah. Look, about 7 years ago or so. It was probably back in 2014-15, when we really started thinking about how we can solve pain points for our lawyers, and we undertook the process of design thinking and really understanding how we can change the way in which the lawyers are working in particular areas. We actually identified a verification opportunity. So I won't go into all the details around the legal side of things, but our lawyers have to painstakingly review documents, and traditionally that was done with pen and ruler or pencil and ruler and erased many times, and I had the privilege of doing this many times in my career as well, so I suppose it was a personal pain point on my side too, but we actually sought to really develop technology internally, and whilst the legal industry now has an ecosystem of technology available that they can tap into or that we can tap into, when we started on this journey back in sort of 2014-15, there wasn't that ecosystem that existed, so there actually wasn't a technology that solved for our pain point. And we actually went about and sort of developed this ourselves at Gilbert Tobin, which was quite an unusual move for a law firm. Traditionally, we basically deliver legal advice, and now we're actually developing software at the same time. So it was a good opportunity for us. I think we learnt a lot. I think, we had many eureka moments throughout that development. We had to iterate the software. I suppose we learned what it is to support software, to support clients, and really the scale of the technology. And what was quite interesting is a couple of years ago, we actually sold that to Latera, which is a large US legal technology provider that's headquartered in Chicago. So again, quite an unusual move for a law firm to do. But I think that was, both a learning on our end as to how we actually develop software, what we need, the scale in which we need to deliver on that as well. And then obviously a great opportunity at the end that we hadn't necessarily envisaged, 7 years ago when we started on that journey.
So you're highlighting a number of non-legal skills there in this thought process. And so I wonder how legal your team is, Caryn. So how many of them are trained lawyers, and is that still the sort of fundamental skill when you're thinking about innovating in this area?
Yeah, it's interesting, Paul, and I often get asked this question because I often get called, there's definitely demand in the market for legal operations managers, both in a corporate legal department area as well as in law firms, and many ask me, do you actually need a legal degree to do some of this work? I would say definitely not, and actually my team is made up of a variety of individuals, but I do think an understanding of the law is very helpful. So I think certainly, even if I reflect on my career, having an understanding of how you work through a legal problem and the various phases in delivery of a particular matter is very helpful when you're trying to solve for those pain points, because it does take a lot of understanding as to how lawyers think and how they operate, and also the complexity in the law as well. So many of my team, particularly in the transformation space, my team is quite diverse in nature generally, but many in the transformation space are, as they refer to themselves, as reformed lawyers. So, many have been lawyers, and many have, for a variety of reasons, decided that this path is where they wanted to go. So I would say probably 70% or so in my transformation team, but then I've got many other teams that are pure technologists or project managers and haven't had sort of a legal background.
Very interesting how that's changing.
Absolutely.
So just coming back for a moment to your personal thought process when it comes to innovation, I'm intrigued because a lot of what we hear from other innovators is they tend to have their breakthrough moments when they're out walking the dog or in the shower or falling asleep or some other unrelated activity, something that's got nothing to do with work.
Yeah.
So I just wonder whether that's also true for you, or whether you find that, really and truly those moments are happening for you when you're in those team interactions.
Yeah, look, I think in terms of me, more solving the problems is where I typically, work as a team and enjoy that banter and, just engagement with team and people throwing their ideas, out there as to how we can actually solve a particular problem. But I will say to you that I think a lot of the, if you want to call them breakthrough innovations for me, happen either alternately when I'm in sleep, often on a car ride. Like that tends to be one of the areas, maybe it's just an opportunity where I have some clear thought. I might, have dropped the kids at school and then, moving on to work. But I think it's probably in some of those areas, probably a combination, but definitely also when I'm by myself, I think just gives you the opportunity to think more broadly.
Yeah, well, as you know, I'm intrigued as to what happens in our brains when we have those moments. It seems to be when that prefrontal cortex is distracted or otherwise occupied that these ideas seem to emerge. Tell us a bit more about sort of current and maybe sort of focus in the last 12 months. I mean, where are you and your team focusing? Where do you see those opportunities, and what are some of the innovations? You mentioned the Latera one, which obviously you've now sold off. But what are some of the others that have happened, over time or currently under scrutiny?
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, I think the legal industry will undergo significant change, even more change over the next sort of decade or so. And one of the sort of initiatives that we put in place was the development or introduction of what we refer to as our GT Docs unit. And really that is Gilbert and Tobin's service delivery centre. So we really put it in place to deliver on large scale document reviews. And we've got both an onshore team as well as an offshore team as well. And I think what they did for us is it really demonstrated that, creativity in outsourcing can really enable a firm like Gilbert and Tobin without an international footprint to not only establish an offshore sort of service centre, but also do so in a manner that actually improves also quality and efficiency, whilst also relieving some pressure on some of our onshore resources. And it is a combination of both in-house, internal onshore resources as well as offshore resources. And a really big focus for me is really building out that capacity and capability over the next sort of 12 to 18 months. So up until now, we've really supported on large scale document reviews, so in the litigation disputes as well as regulatory area. And we're really now moving on to areas like due diligence and supporting on corporate transactions, as well as, some of those very routine tasks that need to be done at scale. That's really what we're driving. So we've got a lot of work that we are undertaking at the moment. There's been huge consultation, lots of design work to really build out this unit, both onshore as well as offshore, to support the growing demands of the business. And we, Gilbert and Tobin has grown enormously over the last few years. And to keep up with that demand, we obviously need to be quite creative in the way in which we think about our resourcing.
And when you come at one of these areas, Caryn, how important is it how you frame the question, if you like? Is there one overarching frame of reference that you're employing as you work through each of these different areas, or does a particular inquiry need to be framed in each case? How do you think about that, and how important is that?
Yeah, look, we do, there might not be one particular question, although one question that always stands out for me and always is front of mind is it going to be creating value? Okay. That is something, and I think it is helpful to have some form of question over there, because then at least you can assess it against what you're actually trying to achieve and make sure that we're going in the right direction. Often we find, and I'm sure, you're very familiar with this, Paul, in that you need to break things up into particular chunks because it might be too much all to deliver in the next 6 months or whatever that looks like. So I think having a really clear understanding as to, what is it that we're trying to deliver on, what is it that we need to solve for, which is the other issue, because you can sort of meander in lots of different ways because you might get excited by different areas along the journey because you might identify other things. So really making sure that we've got the eyes on, what we're wanting to achieve and how that can create value is certainly something we're very focused on.
So it sounds like there's been lots of highlights in this process. But if your life was a movie and there was one scene that we had to pick for review, what's the one thing that stands out for you?
Look, certainly from a professional point of view, I think for me, it would be when I made partner. I made partner back in 2018, which was quite a unique move within the legal industry. I came out of client-facing practice for a variety of reasons. When I had my first child, I worked in Sydney for a number of years and then worked in the UK for a number of years as well, and decided that, it was time to focus a bit on a family at that point. So I came out of client-facing law, and that was a really difficult decision for me because I absolutely loved, corporate law, everything it had to offer. The combination of legal and business together was absolutely terrific. And I really thought at that point in time that I had lost all, ability of sort of that trajectory within the legal industry. And, so for me, being promoted to partner by Gilbert and Tobin in 2018 was a very unusual thing within the legal industry because it certainly was not the traditional career trajectory. We are seeing, a bit more of that now within the industry, but back in 2018, it just was unheard of unless you sort of had a very client-facing practice, you didn't make it up to partner. So for me, that was, something that was obviously something that I wanted longer term and was a great result.
Do you think this is something that's happening outside of law? I'm thinking of other traditional professions like accounting and some of these other big practices. Is this something that you've heard is occurring elsewhere?
Absolutely. Look, I think it is, and it's certainly occurring now within the legal industry as well. I think there is a recognition that to deliver any form of professional services, it will take a variety of different skill sets and disciplines. And, when you reflect on the evolution of my team has data scientists and technologists and lawyers and project managers and management consultants. So it's really quite diverse in nature. But the reality is we support our lawyers in the delivery of their legal services. And I think there is that growing trend and growing need to have a variety of different disciplines to deliver on professional services. So yes, it seems to be occurring across professional services, and I think we're probably going to see more of it over the next decade.
I'm intrigued, Caryn, in your title. So apart from being a partner, you're also the Chief Knowledge and Innovation Officer. Is that just to give you more work, or are these things actually related?
It's certainly a mouthful, isn't it? I think certainly in the legal industry, it is very related because we are in the business of delivery of knowledge, effectively, legal advice, delivery of knowledge, and underpinning most of the innovations that we deliver on is a huge volume of knowledge. So, we obviously are focusing very heavily on digitizing the way in which we deliver some of our legal services. But the foundation is that if we're going to develop an app or we're going to develop some form of expert system or whatever that looks like, the basis of that is legal knowledge. So you need to get your legal knowledge right, and then you can overlay the technology, for example. And we think very similarly, even in, our GT Docs launch or our verification tool, it's understanding the baseline process, understanding the actual legal knowledge that sits below it. And that's often where, having a background in legal can be very helpful. And then you overlay it with, the technologies, the new processes, the new ways of thinking. So absolutely, I think they do go hand in hand, certainly within the legal industry. And even so much so, Paul, one of the teams that sits within my team, there's the Legal Service Innovation team and G&T Innovate, but I've got sort of 5 teams that sit within that. We actually rebranded that because it was knowledge management, which is very traditional within the legal industry, and that type of team has been, there for many, many years. We've actually rebranded that to knowledge and practice innovation, with a view to understanding that actually you need to overlay the innovation to the knowledge to actually deliver on that. We're going to have artificial intelligence, which is going to, change the way in which we deliver legal services.
So just reflecting on that from perhaps a process perspective, how similar do you think learning, so acquiring or practicing the knowledge is to innovation, or do you see them as quite distinct experiences?
I think it's quite similar, and I think they go hand in hand. I think to innovate, you need to constantly learn, and sort of that chicken and egg. So absolutely, I see them going hand in hand for sure.
Is there one piece of advice that has really shaped you as an individual that you would be willing to repeat on the podcast?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think when I came out of client-facing law, and I started actually at Gilbert and Tobin, what was then a knowledge management role, one of the corporate partners, who was then the knowledge partner in that particular team, sat down with me on my very first day, and his piece of advice to me was really interesting. He said, you can make this role your own. He said, in the past, we've had people do very different things with these roles. And he said, it's really up to you. You can sit there and just, do the very basics. You can sit there and rethink the role. You can sit there and deliver on it very differently. And I've always actually remembered that piece of advice because I think if I reflect on that particular role, that actually was the start of my innovation career, effectively, in that I got involved in projects that were not necessarily traditional knowledge management roles, and as a result, I moved into an innovation or dedicated innovation role. So that was certainly bits of advice that I've always reflected on and thought was really true. And I think that's true for any role, in that you can really make and when people join my team, it's funny because I tell them the same thing. So I tell them, so I've sort of almost replicated that. And certainly I feel quite passionately about you can do what you want within roles, obviously having some guardrails, but the world is your oyster and you can really take on all opportunity if you want to.
And Caryn, when you're facing a more complex innovation challenge, is there a method or a technique or a way that you normally start out that you find really helpful as generating momentum and getting that initial movement on the challenge?
Yeah, so we typically have a process that we follow within the organisation, and it's embedded within sort of lean design thinking. So typically we always want to understand what the current state is. Like, that's where we go because we need to fully understand what the particular issue is and what we're trying to solve for. And then only later on do we look to then overlay whatever that looks like, the innovative solution, whether it be technology, new ways of working process, or, changing talent, whatever that looks like. But we definitely focus on what is it that we're trying to solve for. And we typically go through we have a 5-stage process at GNT to make sure that we've captured absolutely everything. But we spend a lot of time in that initial diagnostic phase and then that design phase on top of it. And that is because I feel quite passionately about truly understanding the problem, because too often you can solve for the wrong problem. And it might be that actually, off the back of a particular request, a lawyer might think they have a problem in one area, but actually you find the root cause is quite different, and you need to get to the bottom of that before we actually solve for it. Or it might be multiple problems that you need to solve for, and if we just go with one particular solution, it might not actually solve for that holistically. So really understanding that problem, spending a lot of time in that design phase. I mean, even our GT Docs unit, we spent months working with the lawyers to understand all the various areas that we needed to work on, and really understanding that problem and then looking at what that opportunity looks like.
I'm interested to know whether there's an emotional element to that as well, whether it's purely a sort of a cognitive build of that understanding? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's probably both. I think there probably is an element of the emotional side too. I think it also depends on the actual pain caused by that particular pain point. Often it might not be. And that's why we do always need to keep in mind what the actual value is to solving it, because we do encourage our lawyers to come to us with their particular pain points. But as you would appreciate, some are bigger pain points than others, and some might arise maybe once a year. But in fact, even though it might cause a lot of pain and it might be emotionally draining on people, it might not actually be worth investing time and energy to solve for it for once a year. So we try to take quite a pragmatic approach and remove some of the emotional side, but there's no doubt that you definitely do get caught up in that.
So we were talking a moment ago just about the advice that you give new starters in Gilbert and Tobin about really, the world being their oyster and making as much as they possibly can of that role and opportunity. But I'm just interested if there's any person alive or dead that you could have dinner with to get maybe a similar kind of benefit. Who would that be?
It's an interesting one. I mean, there's many. Obviously there's some amazing business people, but I actually think someone like Nelson Mandela would be very interesting. I'm always fascinated by, I grew up in South Africa, so I obviously have an emotional connection over there, but I'm always fascinated by individuals who can overcome such hardship and then, do such amazing things. So certainly Nelson Mandela would fit into that category for me. So yes, I would have loved the opportunity to meet him, but I think Nelson Mandela for sure.
Thanks, Caryn. And just a couple of perhaps more personal questions to finish off. What do you do as your sort of stress release, your vent? Because it sounds like this is pretty full on. There's a lot of a lot of learning, but also a lot of work and a lot of analysis. How do you freshen up?
Drink lots of coffee, Paul. I would love to say lots of exercise. I was very good before COVID, but that is something I need to work on again now. But I did used to love the gym, and that was a great, way to de-stress and just, unwind a bit. But I would say for me, it's really around spending time with family, both my immediate family, my kids, husband, as well as I've got a very close sort of immediate family as well, so with lots of little children and stuff. So I would say for me, it's around spending time with family and just, having that personal side as well as the professional side.
So with so many achievements, and I think you mentioned you've been in this role for 8 years now. Is that right? What do you see as the next frontier for you? What's the next challenge all about? Is it more of the same, or is there something that is setting itself up as a goal or an aspiration for you?
Yeah, I think for me it's actually a bit more of the same. I definitely wanted to sit on some not-for-profit boards, and I've got myself onto those over the last few years, and that's, certainly from a personal point of view, very fulfilling, and I enjoy giving back to the community as well. I still love what I do. I think there is so much opportunity within the legal industry, and I think we haven't even scratched the surface. So, there were very big promises of areas like AI and the like, and we really haven't seen that evolve in the way in which I think we will see it over the next 10 years. So I think the next 10 years are going to be there will be really significant change within the industry, and I'm very pleased to go along for that ride, and really focusing on making GNT the best firm it can possibly be and delivering the best legal advice, using the tools and new ways of working that we have at our disposal. So certainly I think there's a lot more that we can give within the industry. I think the other thing, Paul, though, is one thing I should raise is I think there is going to be quite a bit of change in the way in which we train lawyers. So I think there is going to be, and there is already startings of this, but a really big focus on other areas in which lawyers need to focus on. So not only the legal training, but areas like, being focused on design thinking, project management, continuous improvement, technological literacy and the like. And certainly that's an area that I feel quite passionately about, and I'm hoping that I will involve myself even more in, whatever it might look like over the next few years.
Thanks, Caryn. Really, really appreciate your time. I guess this is a parting shot for our listeners. Just thinking about the Crazy Smart Word podcast is really focusing on that breakthrough insight innovation. Is there any insight that you would leave with our listeners in closing?
I think for me, innovation is everyone's responsibility. I often hear, I've got a dedicated team that is focusing on innovation, but I always, tell the lawyers that everyone has a role to play in innovation. And I think that's true in whatever industry you're in. I think we operate in a world that is very fast moving, has huge amounts of change on the horizon on a regular basis. The last 2 years have certainly taught us that. And I think it is everyone's responsibility in any role to continuously improve the way in which they deliver whatever it might be. So I think for me, it's not about only having dedicated innovation sort of focused teams, but that, my message would be everyone has a role to play in innovation and making Australia, making the way in which we work the best it can possibly be going forward.
Fabulous. Thanks so much, Caryn. Really appreciate your generous time this morning, and some of that reflection and advice I think will certainly give others a lift up in their own journeys and careers. So thank you so much for that.
No problem, Paul. Thank you very much for having me on. Always a pleasure to speak to you.
You're welcome.